when I first started to go out on the road, particularly as well as in the Bay Area, and kind of present these teachings, it was exciting to just see people in areas where the concept wasn't well, the concept didn't really exist 20 years ago. So it's been exciting every time to see those communities start to coalesce, and for it to now become sort of a regular thing, that many people are approaching in different ways. Um, yeah, and I see some of my regulars from my Zoom classes are here. Julie, hi, Paula, Howard. And yeah, if you're interested just in sitting with me, actually this morning, Tuesday morning, Pacific time, 10 a.m. So that's noon Central, and then Friday nights at 7. My website is kevingriffin.net. You can see all my events on there. But tonight, or I hesitate to even name a time of day because this morning I had somebody who was in Hawaii and somebody who was in England. So right now, whatever time it is, wherever you are, time is relative. We just discovered. Yes, Zoom has allowed us to conquer time. Now, if it would allow us to conquer space, we would be all set. But anyway, um, let's begin with a sit. And I thought we would just sit for about 20 minutes, and I'll give some guidance, and then I'll talk on the topic for a while, and then take some questions. Really, the questions are probably going to, kind of my favorite part. But yeah, so just settling in. I think that this is my Zoom chair here, and it's starting to get sag, I think, a bit, from all the hours spent sitting on this cushion over the last, what is it now, almost 11 months. But we want to sit in a way that we can be alert and sit with stability, with a kind of solidness. Um, and you don't, obviously, you don't need to look at the screen, which is nice. Little break from screen time. Actually, you don't need to look at the screen at any point during this session. Although, on the other hand, when we're alone so much, it can be nice to see some human faces. In any case, just letting the body settle. So we want to sit in a way that we can be still and yet still be relaxed, and we don't want to be creating tension in the body. And letting the body soften. So some of the particular points of sensation that can help us to relax are the jaw, to relax the muscles in the jaw so that your face softens. To release the shoulders. Soften the belly. You can feel the breath moving deeply into the belly. With the sense of all the energy in the body, all the tension in the body, really draining down into the earth. So that even as you are bright and alert, there's a sense of calm and ease. Now we are practicing mindfulness, so if there is no sense of calm and ease, we don't struggle with that. We just acknowledge that. So we could say that we're bringing an attitude of acceptance. And, sometimes that ease will arise and sometimes not. We try to engage in a process that balances effort with acceptance. So the effort is the one that is that effort to relax and be present. The acceptance is the non conflict, the non resistance or judgment to the results of our effort. Besides being a principle of mindfulness meditation, this is also a principle of recovery, and specifically of the third step of turning it over. So this settling and arriving is a preliminary stage of meditation. And we can include then just a general awareness of our surroundings and any sounds in our environment. And then just checking in with yourself. How are you feeling right now? Although our meditation might change the way we feel, it's often, certainly in the beginning, very much colored by whatever mood or emotions are present. So acknowledging that, allowing that, whether pleasant or unpleasant, or perhaps just a neutral feeling, just to see that. And now bringing more focused attention to the breath. So this is, in a sense, bringing the breath into the foreground of our awareness. We're not pushing away or trying to suppress other elements of our experience, but we let the breath now take the foreground place. We put our attention on the sensations of breathing. What does it feel like to breathe? The simplest, most basic biological behavior, breathing in and breathing out. And you can feel the breath at the nostrils, feeling the air coming in and out. Or if it's easier, you can focus on the movement in the belly, the arising, falling. It's natural for the mind to wander. We discover that even when we mean to pay attention to the breath, the mind also often has other ideas, many of them, pulling us off into thoughts. So we bring a persistence to the practice of coming back. With this practice, really the heart of meditation must be done with care. It's very common for people to judge themselves or to judge their meditation if there's a lot of thoughts. And that's just extra. It's unnecessary. There's no blame involved. We try to take a very neutral position towards our thoughts, just an acknowledgement that thinking is happening, and then just coming back to the breath and starting again. You'll probably notice, though, that the mind wants to make it more complicated. It's to figure out a better way to stay with the breath, or figure out why you can't stay with the breath. Start questioning the practice itself. What's the point of following the breath? The mind just loves to indulge in these flights, these journeys. And we start to see that they are just that. They are just little trips, little stories, little shows, entertainments, distractions. As we let go over and over, we become less enthralled with these stories. There's a beauty, a serenity in the simplicity of breath when we can find it. It takes this persistence, but an attitude of kindness with that persistence to drop into this place. In the meantime, the patterns of thought, the types of thought that are persistent for us, that keep coming back, can be very revealing. Start to understand ourselves, our habitual patterns, even as we let go, moment by moment. So nice to be able to visit with you folks, however virtually that may be. Um, Mississippi is one of the very few states, maybe three, two or three, that I've never been in. And so this is the closest I've come. But hopefully, after we all get that couple of vaccine shots, we'll be able to come down and see you for real. I love, seeing, I think I saw something, how I reconnected with Christy was seeing a post on Facebook about Deep South Dharma, and just hearing that name really inspired me. I live in Northern California, the Bay Area, and it is like the cliche place for Dharma. A Buddhist on every corner. It's great to know that these teachings are spreading uh, throughout the country and the world. Um, so so yeah, we talked about what we could make as a theme tonight, and just thought keep it very simple. Um, uh, Mindfulness in recovery. This is kind of the sort of starting point of connecting the Dharma. And so, for those who aren't familiar with this language, Dharma means truth, or truth with capital T, natural law, sometimes it's called. Uh, it's also uh, can mean just the teachings of the Buddha. Uh, so, and mindfulness was a core teaching of the Buddha. It was really the core meditation practice that the Buddha taught, was mindfulness meditation. And indeed, in those teachings, awareness of the breath was the first thing he taught, and which is kind of amazing that 25, 2600 years, people have been doing this practice. And, it's become sort of popularized in the West, and indeed commercialized as well, as we do so well in our country, especially. Oh, it's popular. Oh, can we charge for that? Can we make some money? Um, but nonetheless, it retains its purity, its essence, its simple essence. Um, and maybe that's why it has survived for so long, because it is so simple. Um, there's no faith involved in it. There's no uh, great study involved in uh, figuring out how to be mindful of the breath. It's the most basic and essential thing that we do in our lives. It represents the beginning of our lives. You slap the baby and they start crying and breathing, and sort of the story of life, crying and breathing. Uh, but and it represents the end. If you've ever been with somebody in their last moments, the last thing they do that really tells you that they're dead is they exhale. I was with my mother for that moment. So it bookends our life, breathing in and breathing out. Um, but to bring it out of the grander, or more sort of spiritual or esoteric, whatever, thinking, to get at what mindfulness has to do with recovery. Um, I work a lot with the 12 steps, but I try to make the 12 steps be accessible beyond the typical ways of understanding them. So, from my view, step one, which says we admitted we were powerless over whatever our addiction is, um, that admission comes out of mindfulness. That is, mindfulness is just really being aware. Uh, I mean, it has more subtle elements to it, but the starting point is being aware. And with addiction, when we're in denial, there's no awareness. And even if there's a sort of knowing. It's not really a mindful knowing. Mindfulness really implies this engagement of full presence and fully seeing what we're experiencing, so that they call it the moment of clarity, right? In the 12-step literature, that moment of clarity is that moment of waking up, uh, is a moment of awareness, of we could say of mindfulness. Mindfulness allows us to see what's going on in our experience, and it, as our the practice that we teach, the meditation practice of observing the mind particularly, is another really valuable piece of this, certainly for everyone, but in particular for people in recovery, because it's our thinking, fundamentally, that is really pulling us down. It's what's causing our suffering. So, but not thinking alone. It's mindfulness isn't, and sometimes the word mindfulness sort of can give us the impression that we're just trying to be aware of our mind, and in our culture, that kind of means be aware of your thoughts, I guess. Yeah. But mindfulness really demands that we tune in on multiple levels. And the level that I think is so important for everyone, again, but especially for addicts, is the felt experience. The To be mindful of what you are feeling, and mindful of how you are reacting and to stimuli, to experiences. So just in the most basic way, the way an alcoholic responds to thinking of or seeing a drink. Uh, the craving, right? The desire. So connecting with that, starting to see craving, so important to be able to change our relationship to that. Otherwise, because craving is something that's very kind of plugged in, right? We're kind of hardwired to crave. And it's, again, part of human nature to crave. We crave food, we crave sex, we crave, you know, um, uh, social contact, uh, we crave comfort. But for an addict, the craving spins out of control and starts to uh, take us into these destructive realms. That craving is typically, it's not seen, we're not conscious of it. So until we bring it into our awareness, until we bring mindfulness to it, we can't really transform it. We can't really let it go. Again, another kind of principle of mindfulness is that you can't let go of something you're not aware of. Kind of obvious. But if we've got these destructive impulses, and craving is one side, the other side being aversion or negativity, which, contains, you know, anger, fear, resentment, all the negative emotions, equally tend to trigger addictive behavior. So a big part of sustaining and being comfortable with our recovery is becoming very familiar with these triggers and being able to see them in the moment. And I'll say in very simple terms, but it's not that simple, to let them go. So, there's a lot involved in letting go. Like, we go to a lot of meetings and we work the steps and we call our sponsors and we do service, and we take care of our responsibilities in the world, and all of that is part of not living in our addiction, not acting on our addiction. But the starting point of all of that has to be seeing it and knowing, oh, there's that impulse. I need to do something else. So the meditation practice teaches us a way to do something else without having to actually change our circumstances. So it's not the only answer. It's not like, oh, just meditate and that'll be your program. You know, but it becomes this foundational element of it, what we can call, and it is often called a training. In fact, I think the last time I saw Christy, she gave me the sweatshirt that says mind training that I should have been wearing that tonight. One of my favorite hoodies. So it's a training in that we sit with ourselves. We're not doing anything. Meditation is so interesting in that regard. Okay, I'm just going to sit down and do nothing. And then the whole world arises, right? Everything comes through, and we see that we contain, as Walt Whitman famously said, we contain multitudes. We see all the stuff that's in us, but we're not doing anything. We're just practicing, right? We call it that. We're practicing meditation. We sit and a thought comes up, no matter what it is, we see it. But first, typically, we don't see it, right? We're just in it. But then we kind of wake up. There's this sort of odd thing that happens when we bring intention to being aware of the mind. At a certain point, we realize, oh, I'm thinking. And then in that moment, through this simple instruction, oh, I'm meditating. I'm supposed to be meditating on my breath. What I need to do now is just move my attention to my breath. And we do that. And what typically happens, although not in every case, but typically what happens is that just in that seeing the thought and then coming back, the thought disappears. And there's a lot that we can learn from that moment. For one, we realize thoughts only have the power that I give them. If I don't feed it, if I don't follow the thought and spin it out, it just goes away. Well, that's interesting because thoughts kind of run our lives, Uh, so to be able to realize that we don't have to be, or that our lives don't have to be run by our thoughts is like one of the first prime insights that we get from this practice. And what we are doing in that moment is training ourselves to let go in the simplest of ways. We're not, it's interesting, even the term let go isn't necessarily a perfect description of what happens there. Sometimes we say let be, but it's also a kind of turning away from, I'm kind of turning away from the thought, saying, kind of thank you for sharing, and I'm not going to pursue you right now. I'm just going to go to the breath. I'm making a different choice, right? The essence of recovery, you know, uh, making better choices in our lives. So this very simple practice that we do, and we, as a meditation practice, it's ideal if you do it on a daily basis because it has the training effect is that it trains you when you do it over and over to be able to be more aware and capture those moments of, oh, wow, where's my mind going? To see them, to get more skilled or more conscious of when your mind is going to unhelpful places. And then it also trains you, of course, to let go. also has this, one of the main benefits people come to meditation, of course, is that is the kind of what we call stress reduction. That's the kind of mindfulness language of it, the contemporary mindfulness language. But it's that releasing of tension, of stress that happens in that moment when you turn toward the breath and away from the thought has this calming effect on the nervous system that is so vital and precious, especially for addicts who tend to run on a kind of high frequency, and to be able to turn it down to cool those passions, then has a daily and moment by moment benefit. And it's this cooling happens just right in that moment of turning away from the thought back to the breath, back to the present. So this is what I see as kind of the first element and the kind of key connection of mindfulness here is this kind of just to be aware. Now, if I uh, we'll talk a little bit about the steps, I think, and kind of connect it a little bit to the steps in some other explicit ways. Um, One of the ways that uh, we can use mindfulness in working the steps is to actually think of it as a higher power. When we say we turn our will and our lives over to the care, if we turn our will and our lives over to the care of mindfulness, it's a very interesting thing to do. Reflect on that. What would that mean? Well, it implies that I trust that mindfulness has a healing power. And so step two is that, of course, is the we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So if we came to believe that being more conscious, being more mindful could help me to be more sane, that's not a leap. In fact, I would say that's pretty true. And so once we see that, oh, mindfulness itself is powerful. Just in that moment, look at that. When I turn away from that angry thought or that grasping thought, and I come back to the breath, I'm feeling freedom in that moment. I'm cutting myself off from that addictive tendency. That's a powerful effect. So I see, okay, yeah, step three could be turn my will and my life over to the care of mindfulness. In my in my teaching, I broaden that really to say the Dharma is a higher power. And that's, just Christy mentioned that I've written some books. My second book is called A Burning Desire, Dharma, God, and the Path of Recovery. And it's about using the Dharma as a higher power. So it takes apart many elements of the Dharma, not just mindfulness. Loving kindness is another great higher power, turning your will and your life over to the power of love. You know. Um, but to stick with mindfulness, the beauty of that to me is the immediacy of it. I think one of the challenges of for me, I don't have a a sort of theistic view. I have practiced theism, sort of. I was raised Catholic, and when I got sober, I didn't go back to being a Catholic, but I went along with the language of the steps. But at a certain point, I just and this is very personal, and everybody, I'm not at all suggesting that a belief in God doesn't fit with this, um, but if if I don't have, um, well, let me put this a different way. That what I think is very striking about mindfulness is its immediacy. It's right here, right now. And and I would say the same is true, of course, of God. You know, uh, if you believe in God, God is here, right? How can God be anywhere else but everywhere? So I think the idea of that connection really works because this idea of presence, of being mindful, is very much the presence of God, if you view it that way, or if that's how what your belief system is. But the what's valuable to me about that is that it's not theoretical. It's not something out there that I have to depend on. I can feel it right here and now. I can feel mindfulness. I can feel the impact of my own awareness in this moment when I breathe and take a breath, when I feel my heart, when I feel my body, when I feel my emotions. It's all here right now. So just to move a little bit more through the steps, the the fourth step is the one that introduces the idea of a searching and fearless moral inventory. And steps 4 through 9 are kind of this engagement with the inventory and sharing it, and then trying to let go of the so-called character defects or shortcomings that are revealed in that, and then making amends. But that first aspect of it, step 4, having an inventory, is really supported by mindfulness of our thoughts. We see, oh, this is here's my anger, here's my resentment, here's my lust. These things they're all in my mind. They're all being revealed to me. So the meditation can be, as much as we're trying to let go of our thoughts, the fact is that they're showing up a fair amount of the time, if not most of the time. And so uh, the way we can utilize them is to make them part of this process, to reveal, oh, okay, these are the habit patterns, these are the things that I really need to be aware of. And then steps 6 and 7, which are to me like the letting go steps, then those are the steps in which I work with transforming those things and letting go of anger, letting go of lust. uh, and and there's a lot involved in all of that. It's not that I see it and I let it go, but bringing mindfulness into the process is what, uh, to me, sort of undergirds the whole process. Uh, because we've already been talking about how we let go in mindfulness meditation. Well, if step 7 is about letting go, which is how I view it, it's the step 7 says we humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. Okay, well, what if I humbly asked mindfulness and loving kindness and wisdom to remove my shortcomings? Yeah, that kind of works. Through that process, uh, we let go. And as as we know, and anybody who's worked these steps knows, we don't just let them go and they're gone. They keep coming back. They're deeply conditioned, these habit patterns. So, certainly steps 6 and 7, and really all the steps are ones that we go back to over and over. But the clinging comes back and we let it go, and it comes back, we let it go. And over time, that weakens. Um, maybe a little more on this. Just to say that in terms of sort of seeing mindfulness as aligned with the steps. Of course, step 7 is sort of a reiteration of steps 4 through 9. It's continued to take inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. That's where mindfulness is, again, so vital, is to see the tendencies, to see the uh, reoccurrence, and to catch it and let it go. And then, of course, step 11 then is the prayer and meditation step. So it's step 11 is really one of the reasons that people come to mindfulness meditation. It's one of the things that brings people to my teachings as their sort of original purpose for, like, oh, this guy's teaching about Buddhism in the 12 steps. Maybe he'll help me to do my 11th step. Happy to do it. Uh, and step 12 I kind of, I love step 12. I mean, it's really such an uplifting step. Some of the steps, don't feel so good, not always excited about the making amends and taking inventory. But having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, um, I really see each of the steps as being a spiritual awakening. But uh, again, to me, being present for my experience, being present for my heart and mind, that is awakening. So mindfulness is awakening. And according to the Buddha, it is the path to the highest forms of awakening. Uh, I love the way that steps 12 works. It's got three parts that having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry this message. So the idea that a spiritual awakening is connected to service, uh, it says a lot about awakening. It says that awakening is not about me. It's explicitly not about me. That awakening, because awakening is really awakening to, in Buddhist terms, the emptiness of self, the idea that what we were trying to satisfy, that this self that we sort of build our whole life around, is really just a construction. And that's kind of the ultimate Buddhist enlightenment. In 12-step work, we just talk about self-centeredness was our problem, right? But all of it points to the same thing, which is that, like, if I'm just trying to fix myself and worry about myself all the time, I create more suffering for myself. One of my favorite teachers, a Buddhist monk, Ajahn Sumedho, I don't know if I heard him say this on a recording or read it, but in any case, simple line. Whenever I think about myself, I get depressed. And this is a person who's been a monk for 50 years. So I thought, wow, okay. So this idea that spiritual awakening is about transcending self and transcending self, not in some exotic way, but just sort of letting go of like self-centeredness. And then the end of this 12 steps says that uh, we practice these principles in all our affairs. I love that because it's the line that closes all the loopholes. In case you were thinking there were times when you didn't have to follow your spiritual principles, no, this is for all the time. This is for home and out, away. Uh, and this is, if we look at again, the early Buddhist teaching, there's the famous sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness. In that sutta, the Buddha describes like every action that we can take, including going to the bathroom. There it is in the sutta. It's like, really? Okay. He's, the Buddha was very down to earth, shall we say. And he's just like, you should be aware all the time. Uh, so it's the same message, right? That our our spiritual practice, our mindfulness practice, our recovery, our sobriety, they are things that we need to live. They're not just we show up at a meeting and talk a good game, or we sponsor a couple people and then we're good. It's like just go to church on Sunday and the rest of the week, do what you want. That kind of hypocrisy. No, this is about being awake and aware all the time. And and yeah, the the 12 steps tell us to do that, but they don't quite have the same tools. So this is another reason why it's so helpful to integrate mindfulness and see, oh, right, this tool, this ancient tool that the Buddha taught is something that really applies and helps me to fulfill the ideas that are in the steps and in the recovery world, the challenges of recovery, the challenge to be awake and aware. So that seems like enough for now. I'd love to open it up and take questions. Um, probably easiest.